Well, good afternoon, at least here on the East Coast. It's Thursday, October 30th, and I'm Dan Stein, President of FAIR, and I'm joined today with Shari Rendall, who is our state and local director here at FAIR. Welcome, Shari.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, we all know that Election Day is only 1 week away, and so whoever you vote for, get out and vote. Very important. Everybody who's eligible to vote should get out and vote. Lots of news in immigration today. We're going to be talking a lot about what's happening in the state and local elections and certain candidates you may be interested in, as well as propositions and initiatives. But I want to say a few things first about birthright citizenship. And I also want to tell you that I'm sitting here looking at our Facebook page, and your comments and questions will be answered. And all you have to do is get on board and answer those questions. Ask those questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. Donald Trump made a statement to Axios reporter Jonathan Swan the other day. And I know Jonathan, and he's a really good reporter, and if anybody's going to get a scoop, it's going to be Jonathan. And Donald Trump said, my legal advisors are telling me that I don't have to wait for Congress to pass a statute banning birthright citizenship. Birthright citizenship is a provision that says anybody who has children here, whether you're here illegally or not, gets to bestow U.S. citizenship on his or her child. So that means that mothers who are here illegally, even if they've been here for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, go into labor, go to a local hospital, even if they've entered without inspection, and therefore have never subjected themselves to U.S. jurisdiction, their children are considered U.S. citizens and are eligible for all the federal and state benefits that any other citizen is. Not surprisingly, that's turned into a mega magnet for people around the world who want to have children here. And lo and behold, our affiliated law institute has done some research and filed several amici briefs on this question, which happen to agree with Donald Trump's legal assessment, which is, first of all, number one. In fact, the Supreme Court has never ruled that people here illegally can bestow U.S. citizenship on their children. In fact, the only significant Supreme Court precedent, a case called Wong Kim Ark, goes back to 1896, was actually about whether or not permanent resident aliens who happened to be at that time ineligible to become U.S. citizens, whether or not their children would be U.S. citizens. And the Supreme Court held, yes, they were. And the premise of it was that the parents owed a political allegiance to the U.S. They'd been here for a substantial period of time, and as permanent resident aliens, they had formed fixed attachments and were subject to U.S. jurisdiction. And it turns out, if you look at the debates of the 14th Amendment back in 1868, a lot of the discussion turned on the question of national allegiance, whether or not there was an allegiance to the country, and therefore whether or not people should be entitled to birthright citizenship, if they were just visiting or coming through. Nobody ever anticipated this proposition that we're talking about people who just come in over the border and suddenly have a child here, or so-called birth tourism, where people come in on a visitor visa for a couple weeks and then bestow citizenship on a child by having the children here on the U.S. hospitals. Nothing could have been further from the idea of the framers of the 14th Amendment than the kind of shenanigans we see going on now. And so what Donald Trump is doing is essentially saying the Supreme Court will have to rule on this. No doubt there'll be legal challenges, but it appears on the basis of the legal record that Congress and or the president retain the right to define who's eligible for birthright citizenship unless the mother is either a permanent resident alien or a U.S. citizen. And whether the truth of the matter is, of course, there will be activist judges, but the truth is that ultimately we all need to hear more from the Supreme Court. We need to get a ruling on this. And so it's very important that Donald Trump has initiated this discussion, initiated this debate, because if we don't get some kind of guidance from the Supreme Court, we're talking now the number of births to illegal alien mothers in public hospitals nationally is on the order of 300,000 to 400,000 a year, 300,000 to 400,000 a year. That actually dwarfs the average level of overall immigration through most of our country's history. Not only that, but birthright citizenship confounds the operation of U.S. immigration law. In many cases now, unlike prior years when parents were deported and who had minor children, even if the children were U.S. citizens, they would take the children home with them. Today, we see states like Maryland passing these guardianship laws where parents who are being deported simply sign a little form and say, okay, you take care of my kid, for a while until I can figure out how to get back here. And Maryland is one state that makes it very easy for people to pass off guardianship without any real legal court action, just like that. And so in a sense, this kind of manipulation is being institutionalized. In FAIR's view, birthright citizenship should be for taken derivatively for parents who are permanent resident aliens or citizens. If the mother is not one of those, then the child would take the citizenship of the mother. Unless in the extraordinary case, the child would be stateless, which is not a good outcome. In the end, after a certain residency requirement, perhaps the option could be given to the child once he or she reaches 18, 21, to become a U.S. citizen. But this idea of automatic birthright citizenship makes absolutely no sense in the modern world. It's out of step with most of the countries around the world. And what Donald Trump is trying to do is put this country back on a level playing field with most other countries, and take some pride in the idea that citizenship is something that is earned by people who respect our laws and immigrate the proper way. So with that, I will then turn it over to Shari. We're going to talk about some of these key races. Now, I want to express a caveat here. FAIR is not an electioneering organization. We do not engage in political activity. We do not endorse candidates, and we are not telling you who to vote for. We are simply discussing different races that may be of interest to you who are involved in immigration issues, as well as certain propositions. And I don't think anybody doesn't know right now that FAIR has had a prominent role in assisting Oregonians for immigration reform and achieving the number of signatures that needed to get on the ballot in Oregon. And here to update on the status of Proposition 105. Shari, what's going on out in Oregon?
Well, Dan, voters have a historic opportunity to be the first state to repeal a sanctuary law. Many people may not recall, but Oregon was actually the first sanctuary state back in 1987, even before California. And they are going to be giving their voters the opportunity to repeal the state's first sanctuary law. It's one of the only places where voters can actually influence an immigration issue. Most of the time when you are either voting for or against a candidate, you're voting based on the candidate's position, but you don't have the opportunity to actually implement a policy.
So Oregon's had the oldest sanctuary law in the country. And voters have a chance when they go to the poll to decide whether or not they want to continue that practice. So there's an initiative, Proposition 105, on the ballot. If you're in Oregon, you should be aware of this. If you vote yes on 105, you're voting to repeal Proposition 105. If you vote no on Proposition 105, you are voting for the status quo, continued sanctuary cities.
And if you recall, you had Sergio Garcia out there who had been previously deported. Some articles have him as much as 13 times, some had him as much as 20 times, but then he was released by a sheriff out in Oregon who said he could not be detained because of Oregon's sanctuary law. He then committed 2 assaults, and he is now in jail in Oregon being punished for those crimes when he should have been deported out of this country. And those are how the sanctuary laws protect criminal aliens at the expense.
Right, and because the electors in a proposition are considered the lawmakers, FAIR is permitted to encourage you to vote for Proposition 105 because we are encouraging you to amend the law. So this is not political activity, but this is in fact lobbying. We are in fact advertising out there in Oregon right now on behalf of the committee, the ballot committee, urging people to vote for 105 and against sanctuary lawlessness. So Proposition 105 is something you need to be getting out there to vote for. Yes on 105 if you're in Oregon. All right, where else? All right, Nashville, Tennessee. Very interesting thing happening in Nashville, Tennessee. We have a small group of people who've convinced the city that they should establish a civil rights commission, namely a bunch of hostels, who want to kind of run the city's immigration program. Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. There is an amendment number 1, that is on the ballot in Nashville, which will create a community oversight board. And this is going to be an unelected, unaccountable group of people that will make recommendations about civil rights in Nashville. And there's going to be an 11-member board. Out of the 11 members, 7 members are going to be either appointed by community organizations, or they're going to have to get on by getting 50 people to sign to get their name submitted. And then it gets approved by the city council. Well, these groups are going to make decisions on what the police can and can't do. And if you recall, Tennessee actually strengthened its anti-sanctuary legislation this past legislative session. Many of the groups that opposed Tennessee strengthening their anti-sanctuary legislation are the same groups that are supporting this amendment in Nashville.
It's funny, I mean, you think of Tennessee as a place where people would normally be against illegal immigration, but that's not true, right? Very much split in the state.
Well, and Nashville is one of those areas that has tried to become a sanctuary city. In fact, the reason Tennessee strengthened its anti-sanctuary legislation is Nashville actually was going to consider 2 ordinances to basically thumb their nose at the state's anti-sanctuary law, and it was pulled just before their 3rd reading, and then once the legislature reconvened, they actually passed legislation to strengthen and reiterate that Tennessee is an anti-sanctuary state. So this is Nashville, and their policies have always been to kind of promote and help illegal aliens, and this is how they're seeking to get around possibly the state's anti-sanctuary law.
Now, before we move to the next topic, I wanted to talk about Lindsey Graham's tweet out today. Lindsey Graham surprised us all by saying he thinks ending birthright citizenship, anchor babies, good idea. In fact, he said he's going to be introducing legislation to that effect in the next Congress. Apparently, Lindsey Graham is bucking for Attorney General or chairman of the Judiciary Committee, one of the 2 in the next Congress. But that was surprising. I mean, I think ending birthright citizenship is a good idea. Kind of surprised to see Lindsey Graham on the right side of an issue. Now, I have it on good authority that FAIR is going to be publishing a big election preview issue that will be beneficial to you in thinking through what to do in this election. Tell us about this election preview, and when is it going to be available?
So we are aiming to get this out by the end of this week, just highlighting some of the races across the country. We've been hearing that this could possibly be a so-called blue wave. And right now we were looking at what's going to happen and how it will impact immigration policy.
Looks more like a blue raindrop right now.
Exactly. And ironically, even if there are some seats that flip, many of the states, because the numbers, will retain the same majority. So we were looking at the policies, looking at some races that might be interesting as far as immigration, and there are a couple that I would love to highlight with you.
Go right ahead.
The first being Oregon. Oregon is, as we all know, a deep blue state, and they actually have a competitive governor's race. In all of the publications, it's been listed as a toss-up. And
even though the Republican candidate is endorsed 105.
The Republican candidate has endorsed Measure 105. The interesting thing with Oregon is that you have someone in the Republican candidate who has kind of a checkered immigration policy. He has said that he was against so-called racial profiling, which is how most people describe the state sanctuary law.
Most people, you mean the opponents, frequently mischaracterize the effort to repeal sanctuary law as in favor of racial profiling, right? Typical distortion, typical manipulation of data, typical fake news. Okay, let's go. Apparently Donald Trump is the only person who can be accused of exaggerating or whatever. Come on. What people have said about this resolution, this initiative, is outrageous.
Well, and going back in history, for perspective, it was passed back in 1987 with overwhelmingly bipartisan support, and it was a result of someone who had been asked in a restaurant about their citizenship. So they considered the first state law as anti-racial profiling. The gubernatorial candidate distinguishes this, because he has supported the repeal, as saying there have been other civil rights things done in Oregon to protect people. This actually hampers law enforcement's ability to enforce law and communicate with federal officials. So
Makes things safe for criminals.
Making Oregon safe for criminals. Exactly. So this is a race.
And I mean, the behavior of Antifa in Portland, harassing ICE, for example, total lawlessness, challenging the authority of the police to control mobs. I mean, these mobs that were threatening government workers, people who work for ICE. I mean, these things are outrageous. I would not be surprised to see Proposition 105 win in a very healthy margin.
I believe that is, and I believe that what they did in Portland actually sucked energy from the other side.
So what other races?
So another race that we'd love to talk to you about is in Iowa. We have Governor Reynolds up for re-election. She's running against a businessman, Fred Hubble, who's the Democrat. This is an interesting race because Governor Reynolds has been out in front on immigration law. You had the state pass strong anti-sanctuary legislation, and then shortly after the legislation was passed and signed, you had Molly Tibbetts, who was killed by an illegal alien in Iowa. And Governor Reynolds actually called for ensuring that people who are working in Iowa are here legally, i.e. she's called for E-Verify. So that's an interesting race that we're watching that could flip depending on how voters vote out in Iowa. Another race not far from Iowa, Illinois, a neighboring state. You have Governor Bruce Rauner, who is in a deep blue state, Republican governor, and he is one of the most vulnerable Republicans during this midterm election. He actually signed into law Illinois' Trust Act. He signed sanctuary legislation in Illinois and angered his base. Whereas you contrast that to several other governors in deep blue states. You have Governor Hogan in Maryland and Governor Baker up in Massachusetts, both very liberal states, but the governors in those states telegraphed their opposition to the states trying to pass sanctuary laws, and they are among the most popular governors running for re-election.
How are things looking for Sheriff Chuck Jenkins in Maryland?
Sheriff Chuck Jenkins.
He's the sheriff in Frederick County, Maryland. The one major county in Maryland where you have a sheriff who is very strongly supportive of immigration controls.
Sheriff Jenkins is running in a tough race. It is, and I'm blanking on the Democrat's name, but it is the same. It's Carl Bicker, Carl something. And he is, it's actually a rematch of his last election. And Sheriff Jenkins, if you all know Sheriff Jenkins, is a person who goes out and meets with the people. He is very much in touch with the people in his community. He believes in the rule of law, and he will tell you he wants to enforce the rule of law. One of the controversies that's kind of come up in that race is surrounding 287G, which allows sheriffs to be deputized to enforce immigration laws.
He's been a big supporter of those initiatives.
He has been, and a lot of his race has been on the fact that 287G has been misrepresented in the communities. A lot of people think that they're just going around and arresting and deporting people, but actually 287G goes towards the jails, not...
But I haven't heard that immigration is a big issue in that race in Frederick County.
They are making it, for the sheriff's race, it is focused around the 287G issue, and the fact that a lot of people are coming from outside of Frederick and have been influencing what goes on in Frederick.
In most cases, though, it does seem like the Republicans are the ones making immigration a major issue in this election. By and large, Democrats, except where they're really aggressive in trying to take out somebody, maybe like Sheriff Jenkins, like maybe Steve King in Iowa. By and large, Democrats are pretty silent on the immigration issue this whole time, even including talking about the caravan that is coming up through Central America and may arrive here shortly after Election Day. And the president has now deployed some 5,000 troops, 2,500, 5,000, somewhere between them, taking them down to the border, put them at ports of entry. However, the president says that he will still allow people to perfect asylum claims if they get onto U.S. soil. How's that going to work out? None of us know. But we have heard that there's another caravan following, and this one may be more violent. Why is it happening now, right before the election? Is this helping the president? Is it not? Well, whether it is or not, it's bad public policy to let thousands and thousands of people crash your borders, go through 4 or 5 safe countries. In our view, anybody who has not made an asylum claim in Mexico or any other safe country at the first opportunity should not be eligible to make an asylum claim in the United States. Asylum has really been completely blown open. It's totally out of control. The system doesn't work. It should be a major election issue in this upcoming campaign, but we haven't heard that much outside of the caravan. Any more for us? Is that it?
I think those were the big picture highlights.
Things happening all over the country.
You have some state legislatures that could flip. We encourage you to read our election preview. And one other thing I would say, as Dan said, we do not endorse candidates or oppose candidates, but I would encourage, your vote does make a difference, and I would encourage everybody to make sure that they go out and vote on Tuesday.
So this is your latest update. We'll be back tomorrow with an additional Facebook Live, specifically addressing birthright citizenship and other major topics of the news with R.J. Hammond, who's our Government Relations Director. I'm Dan Stein with Shari Rendall. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, Dan.